For all they've fought against, to have this second in time to know, where do we rank? Are we in?
Gotta check the score, numbers going up.
For this instant, they've made it far enough to be counted.
Oh, holy night, the committee has spoken for one final time. And great googly moogly did it cause some reaction here. It's Rankings Reaction presented by Cheez-It. Christine Williamson, Mike Golic Jr., I'm Jason Fitz, and we're going to be with you for the next hour to react to everything you just got from the final college football playoff committee rankings. But first, let us show you exactly how it went down. The second, we'll tell you, we'll give you all the rankings, but you got to see what the reaction was from one Mike Golic Jr. Here are the rankings. We got Alabama at 1. Clemson at 2, Ohio State at 3, Notre Dame at 4 after getting that butt whooped last night. But coming in at number 5, Texas A&M. I thought it would be easier if I sang it, it would feel better.
We got a social distance or else I'd be stomping a mud hole.
Look, he can't get mad at me because this is what happened. We had the cameras on. We had it rolling. We had it ready for the world to see. The moment that Mike Golic Jr. of Notre Dame fame found out that the Irish were headed to the playoffs. This is what happened.
Oh my God.
All right, yeah, that's a thing.
Ew.
That's all we get. That's a thing. I want some
This is so boring. I wanted it to be so much more exciting than this.
Look, if a committee was deciding on my beloved Raiders and they just decided to throw them in the playoffs, I might get fired for the way I react.
Yeah, I wasn't. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah,
This is anticlimactic.
So that's real. Now, let's peek behind the curtain. I get my car today. I'm driving in, and I'm thinking, oh, my God, we've got this battle at 4 and 5, A&M versus Notre Dame. How's it going to play out? The best parts, I'm going to sit by my buddy and see it all happen live and in person. That's what we got. Explain yourself, Mr. Golic.
Well, to be clear, I just want to clarify that I was saying ill to the actual rankings, not to your reaction. Because I thought it was very anticlimactic, as I said. Not Gojo's reaction. I feel like Gojo's reaction
Gojo's reaction was anticlimactic.
It was, but I feel like it was because of you guys have to face Alabama now, right?
Yeah, it's because I know I get to see highlights of the BCS title game from 13 now replayed over and over again for an entire week, which isn't painful or triggering at all. But, there was... I don't know. I think it's been made very clear that there are 2 elite teams this year, and then there's everybody else. And so I think it's a difficult road ahead to prevent Alabama versus Clemson, part whatever in this. When it comes to the 4th spot, though, I said this last night, and I still believe it now. It could have been any volley of Notre Dame, Texas A&M, or Cincinnati, and I'd have been like, yeah, Notre Dame left the door open for that yesterday. We've talked about this over and over again. I thought losing late would count. Oh, you guys are sick. Are you serious?
Oh, my gosh, they pulled it out.
Serious? I got to throw. Look, Mike is one of my closest friends.
Where did this even come from?
Mike is one of my closest friends, dearest friends. I may or may not have immediately texted the entire group here and said, don't forget, Mike has some experience in this rivalry.
I can't believe Eddie Lacy wore number 40. I'm just glad you didn't show the offense getting tooled on. The one saving grace in all of this. I will say this. I did hear Brian Kelly's assessment of this year's Notre Dame team versus that 12 team because that was going to come up, and he said physicality across the line of scrimmages. I believe he's flat out wrong. Speed in the secondary and the back end is the biggest difference, but now this team getting in over Texas A&M, Oklahoma being 6, and really the biggest problem with all this is going to be Cincinnati not being in that top 6. But I think Notre Dame, absolutely, when you stack these resumes up, this was easily one of the outcomes people needed to be ready for.
Okay, I got to ask you one more follow-up before we get to our first guest, and we've got a bunch of them coming. You said earlier, Alabama and Clemson, clearly the top 2 teams in all the land.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. But going into last night's game, that wasn't necessarily the sentiment everywhere. A lot of people thought that Notre Dame would be able to compete with or beat Clemson. So did you believe 24 hours ago that it was those 2 and everybody else, or did last night's game specifically influence that?
No, last night's game absolutely influenced that. Last night's game was a reminder of the value of a Trevor Lawrence, of all those defensive that everyone told us, but then seeing it go out there and happen in person, seeing Trevor Lawrence do what he did last night, him and Travis Etienne, against a Notre Dame defense that's still very good. Like, the Notre Dame team is not bad now. It's just not Clemson or Alabama at this point when you put them on paper. Do they have a chance going into this game? Absolutely. There's part of me that thinks there are better matchups for them in this game. Obviously, I still do not expect them to win going into this game. But all that being said, I think Alabama and Clemson are just a cut above everyone else right now, and that includes Ohio State this year.
So what we're going to do over the course of the next hour is get you a ton of expertise. We'll give you more of our opinions, more of our thoughts. We'll round out the top 25, but we're going to bring in as many great guests as we can, and one that we always rely on. She's the first of the Rolodex. She's the best at what she does, and she absolutely makes all of us better at our jobs, is Heather Dinich. Heather Dinich, college football reporter, joins us now. Heather, thank you so much for the time. Obviously, this is a slam day for you. So walk us through the committee's process in trying to decide between Texas A&M and Notre Dame.
Well, I can tell you guys that they use their protocol. There is actual written rules and guidance for them to select the 4 best teams in the country. And when 2 teams are comparable, there are tiebreakers. Now, obviously, there's no head-to-head. There's no conference title for either one. Both had a lopsided loss. But when you look at that strength of schedule, that is one of the tiebreakers. And Notre Dame, even though everyone in that committee meeting room knows the first win against Clemson, that first game in November was entirely, obviously different than what we saw last night, you can't take that win away. It still counts. So did the Friday win on the road against a top 15 North Carolina team. And when the committee compared that resume with that of Texas A&M, their best win coming against a Florida team that now has 3 losses, and then an average unranked Auburn team on the road, it went to Notre Dame. And I think it was those 10 games that happened that helped compensate for the loss in the championship game.
Heather, looking at the other portions of this top 6 here, Cincinnati noticeably absent here. How does the committee continue to justify the way that it's treated Cincinnati in these rankings really since week 1?
I'm not surprised, to be completely honest with you, that Oklahoma jumped them because they got a win against a top 6 team in Iowa State. They punctuated their resume with a Big 12 title. Cincinnati, meanwhile, the selection committee has made it clear, especially last week when they went into this week's championship game sitting behind 3 2-loss teams. That was an indictment on Cincinnati's schedule. And beating Tulsa in a close game by a field goal, I don't think was enough, obviously, to change their opinion about the Bearcats. Do they respect them? Yes. But enough to push them up? No.
So now we know who the top 4 are: Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame. We also know that it's 2020. And things have derailed this college football season all throughout it. So let's just say something happens. One of these teams have a COVID issue. Has the committee considered possibly what they would do in that scenario?
Heading into a semifinal game?
Yes.
No, they have not made those plans public yet, but what they have said is that each team will continue to follow its conference's protocols. And my colleague, Adam Rittenberg, literally about 20 minutes ago, just reported that the Big Ten shrank its time frame from 21 to 17 days, I believe is what I saw fly across our news desk. So that could help Ohio State. Remember, that's another thing that the committee recognized, was that they had 22 players out in that championship game against Northwestern, still won. But the point being, by shrinking that time frame a little bit, it could help some of those players who were out for the Northwestern game.
Heather, as always, we appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful holiday. Thanks for giving us so much time so graciously this season.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I was just reacting to more of what's going on, because obviously Twitter's on fire with all this, and I saw someone say, who knew Trevor Lawrence getting COVID was ultimately going to keep Texas A&M out of the playoff here.
I agree with that 100%.
I'm sorry, in this season, you cannot give me arguments about who was there, because I know this committee was put in place to be able to account for people not on the field.
Yeah.
Everyone was without people at different portions of this season. Everyone dealt with some version of this, and so I'm sorry, while while it might have affected some teams more than most, and you can argue for this ripple effect, that's because people are focused in on this situation. Peel this back and go look at the other teams that the committee's ranked low who have had plenty of players missing because of COVID they didn't give a damn about. I'm sorry, this year that one does not fly for me because everyone had to weather so much.
Look, the other thing that needs to be noted is that didn't keep Texas A&M out of the playoff. What kept them out of the playoff was getting their ass kicked by Alabama, combined with the fact that they didn't get realistically, you got to look at who Notre Dame beat. Notre Dame did beat Clemson at one point, and they did beat North Carolina. That North Carolina win is substantial because I'm looking here at the schedule. The only other ranked win that is anywhere on the schedule for Texas A&M is the win against Florida.
Which is a darn good win.
Yeah, it's a spectacular win. We thought it was going to be a gauntlet of a schedule coming into the year. It just didn't turn out to be that. So that's where the resume matchup is difficult. I'm not saying that I would have had no problem either way, obviously, with A&M or Notre Dame going in. But to blame it on Trevor Lawrence being the reason that A&M is out, that's a little bit more difficult for me to stomach. It is Rankings Reaction presented by Cheez-It, Christine Williamson, Mike Golic Jr. I'm Jason Fitz, and again, we're going to go through a lot of expertise over the course of the next hour. So next up, we're joined by Richard Johnson. You can check him out on the SEC Network. We loved having you before. Thanks for coming on again. In your mind, did the committee get it right in leaving A&M out?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, these are the four that I have. These are the four that I had before the games yesterday, and these are the four that we have after the games yesterday. Again, don't really know what's so special about A&M over Notre Dame, right? If Notre Dame and A&M both got slapped by the best two teams in the country, then you sort of drop down to, okay, what's the next sort of best resume bullet point? Obviously, Notre Dame has the literal win over Clemson, although a devalued Clemson because of who was out. A&M has the coin flip win at home over Florida. Okay, those kind of both cancel out. Okay, then you drop down from there and you say, what else is really there on the resume from A&M? I understand they have won the games that they have played, but there's a lot of those games where they have not looked entirely convincing. And, of course, Notre Dame has the win over North Carolina as a check in their box. Texas A&M, 13 points over LSU where they struggled and played with their food. 2 touchdowns over Mississippi State that isn't very good. 10-point win against Auburn. Okay. I just don't sit here and tell me that Texas A&M has this bulletproof resume just because you have to puff your chest out about how good the SEC is under the top rung of teams, which it isn't. It's just like any other league behind Alabama, Florida, sort of the upper crust.
Richard, I'm curious, as you looked at the rankings that came out overall, obviously a lot of people upset about the group of 5 placement, other things. Is there anything that jumped out to you as the most surprising or the most understandably maddening about what we got out of this?
I mean, Lord knows where Cincy's going to be. Heck, Cincy might be out of the top 15. I mean, Cincy might as well not even lace them up. Might as well call it a day this season because I guess this season didn't matter. I mean, we talked about this on Tuesday night when we did ranking reactions. I mean, holding on to these 2-loss teams like you need them for warmth or something in the cold winter is ridiculous to me. I understand if one loss doesn't disqualify. I think that's fair. But the 2 losses thing, get rid of them. Get over them. Cincy's a very good football team.
So you're not feeling Oklahoma then at number 6, I'm guessing.
I think Oklahoma is playing really good football right now. I really do. But the 2 losses, one of them against a bad Kansas State team at home, that stuff's got to matter, even if it was in October.
So I do want to ask you, I saw you tweeting throughout the Alabama game yesterday, and you were talking about all the ballers that they have on their team. The Heisman committee, including Gojo, has to submit their ballots on, I think, Monday. So when it comes to Alabama, how do you feel like that's going to shake out?
I don't know. We joked about sort of visitation rights, and if they can split it, maybe they have to cut it in thirds now. We're talking about fractions of a fraction. Landon Dickerson, who unfortunately may be out for the rest of the season at center. Maybe he needs a portion, cut it into fourths. I don't know how many times we can sliver this award up. But I think, if you really had to press me, I do think I'd give it to Devontae Smith. Again, guys, he had a quiet 15 catches last night, a quiet 18 targets last night in that SEC championship game. I mean, was the definition of a church mouse by Devontae Smith standards. And you would take that for any receiver in the country, probably not named Kyle Pitts or Kadarius Toney, based on what he did last night in that game. I think I want to give it to Devontae Smith over anybody else in that roster.
Richard, we appreciate you hanging out with us. Thanks so much for your time on what's a busy day. Thanks for the insight, my friend. Have a great holiday.
Always, folks.
All right, so let's see. I'm going to see if I can throw our group for a loop. They put up a resume comparison graphic. If we can get it back up, that'd be great. When you actually look at the resumes of these three teams, that's what really all of the controversy is about, like the conversation between Notre Dame, Cincinnati, and Texas A&M. Now, I think we can all eliminate Cincinnati when you look at their resumes side by side, but it's not an easy comparison when you look at the others. They've got it up for us here. When you see the strength of schedule, 10th for Texas A&M, 13th for Notre Dame. Strength of resume, 2nd for Notre Dame, 3rd for A&M. And then you look at the point margin, that's significant because it speaks to game control. So, Christine, when you look at these two teams, it is fairly even. I mean, it's sort of dealer's choice.
I mean, I think the thing is, and we talked about this when the season first started, right? Even including Cincinnati in this, is it's 2020, and it's kind of hard to really put teams right next to each other, especially when you consider Ohio State. They've only played 6 games the entire season. So I feel like the committee had to do a lot of relying on themselves and the conversations that we're having with each other, rather than looking at all of these things specifically. You know what I mean?
I think what we have learned and what we've been reminded is that college football, first and foremost, is about entertainment. That is why ultimately this playoff is going to get expanded. Not because it gives you a better chance of finding the team that beats Bama or Clemson, but because it makes it more entertaining for everyone involved. And no matter what, we will be angry about the things that happen here. I think the Cincinnati thing is not about them being in the top 4. I think it's about continual disrespect. I think it's about this idea, like Richard said, that there's a bunch of mounting 2-loss teams that push them slowly out of that 7 spot, even when Cincy did nothing to push themselves out in that situation. I understand not playing. It's a weird year, but this was about the respect that was not given during almost any point in the season outside of that initial ranking.
So, but let me play the opposite side of it. As the main cheerleader in the front of the Graders Ice Cream Parade every week on this show for Cincinnati, I believe they are deserving, and at some point you got to give one of these teams a shot. But I also see the other side of the logic. I mean, if you had to, right now, if any of the three of us had to sit down and wager all of our money for the next year between Cincinnati and Georgia, who are you taking in that game? Between Cincinnati and Oklahoma, who are you taking in that game?
I understand that, but this is the fine line of best and most deserving. And I think 2 losses has always been a death sentence in the world of the college football playoff. And so why are we not putting those teams at least up closer in proximity? I fully acknowledge, and I've said on this show, the Power 5 competition across the board at that level is better than the Group of 5 competition across the board at that level. But there are outliers, and I think those outliers deserve at the very least a little more respect and reward in the rankings, getting them closer to the bowl games that they need to be a part of. I don't believe Cincinnati should be in the top 4, period. But I think being outside of the top 6 is probably a little ridiculous.
That's, I think, why you need to expand the playoff. I mean, that's the argument right there, right? Let's just say there's 8 teams. If Cincinnati beats an Oklahoma team in what would it be, a 3rd or 4th round, then yes, they're then the most deserving because they actually beat the team that they would have to go through in order to be in the semifinals and finals. So that makes more sense.
But it depends on how you do expansion, because I hear a lot of people say that, and one of the things that was clear when I did the mock committee, take a drink, we always joke about that, but I asked Bill Hancock at the time, who's with the committee obviously, if they ever if expansion was a consideration. Answer was quickly no. If they ever expanded, how would they consider automatic bids? At least then, a couple of years ago, the answer was quickly no. And his answer was, we're not going to be the NFL. Even if there was ever expansion, we're still going to have a committee decide on those 8 teams. Well, as it stands right now, if they expand to 8, that still doesn't get Cincinnati in. Like last week, Cincinnati was sitting at 9.
Yeah.
So even if we expand and you got to make this decision between Georgia and Cincinnati,
I think that sounds great now. Like, we already have bowls where the highest ranked Group of 5 team gets a bid into that bowl game. Like, it's not an idea that doesn't exist already in practice in college football. All of this stuff is open to interpretation because, again, once you get outside of what we've got now, it's not about picking the truest champion. We can wave goodbye to that. That's not what it's about. And you know what? I've become steadily more okay with this idea if we do away with divisions and conferences, because I think that's phony, and I think that's an idea that produces a lesser conference championship. The pod idea that Bill Connelly and so many people bring up and talk about around here would be more viable ways. Mandating certain levels of out-of-conference scheduling, there's ways you could level it out enough to make what is an entertainment model first and foremost more palatable for me. Because all people want to see is a chance. And you can build that bridge to the idea that Power 5 and Group of 5 maybe have more of a gap if you get exactly what Christine described. Maybe some of those early round games closer than expected here, because in some instances it's also tough for those teams to go out and get Power 5 teams to schedule them when they enjoy that wealth of success. To a different level, North Dakota State has that problem at the FCS level, but we've seen UCF run into that. We'll see Cincinnati run into that in the future, I'm sure.
Well, and that all comes back to the conversation of what needs to change. And, the funny thing is, I was listening to ESPN radio as we were getting ready for the show and was hearing a sentiment that I've echoed. Like, I'll throw myself on the sword here and say, I've said this system is broken, that we know who's going to be in the playoffs every year. Last night, I went down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out, at some point, what we've seen in the past as you see Cincinnati's schedule appear, and they're a big part of why we're having this conversation. The ratings for the college football playoffs, the ratings for the national championship, and the ratings for college football overall have been really good. Like, we're talking about college football like there's this massive problem that's going to kill the game. But nothing supports that. Like, right now, if you live in Florida and you grew up in Gainesville, you're still fired up about whether or not Florida can beat Bama, whether they can beat Georgia. You're still fired up. Christine, you're going to be fired up about your Miami rivalries or your Clemson rivalries or your Big 12 rivalries, no matter what happens in the playoffs. So maybe everybody's saying it's broken on Twitter when, in fact, if people are still watching, who the hell cares?
I think when it comes to the CFP versus bowl games, that's the issue. Because for me, as a former athlete, a former student athlete, right, the postseason is hard to get excited about if you feel like you don't have a shot at the biggest possible award, right? Like, if I don't feel like I have a shot at the championship and I'm not a senior, even if I am a senior and I'm playing football, I'm thinking about the NFL. I don't want to get injured in the bowl game that doesn't mean anything, right? That's why Kyle Pitts is opting out and stuff like that. So I feel like it's the fans are excited about it, but you're not going to play your rival in a bowl game if you aren't playing for the CFP.
And that's a fair, like, bowls, this was sort of the trickle-down effect we worried about from the beginning of the college football playoff. Would it reduce the impact that certain bowls have? Like, as somebody that lived in Nashville for a lot of years, when they first got the Music City Bowl, that was a big deal to that city. It was like, man, we're going to have this matchup in this city every year. And now every year it's like, oh, the Music City Bowl is coming.
Yeah, but to your point, that's also Nashville. Like, I played in the Sun Bowl in El Paso. That city rolls out the red carpet for that bowl game. They make it such a special experience for these teams because it does matter to that area. And college football is always going to be more about the towns that are off the beaten path than, no offense, Nashville that has a lot of, like, we were there for the draft and it felt like ho-hum because they have so many other things going on there. So I agree in that sense, Christine, though, there was always going to be a value problem created in this, but that also existed to some extent in the BCS. I think the money, and we talked about this before the show, the professionalization of college sports down to the high school level through recruiting starts so early now that I think guys are conditioned more to see this as a value play. If my school is going to treat me like an investment, why am I not treating myself and my time here the same way?
And I say all of this to have a real open conversation. If I was on the committee, I would find this to be incredibly difficult because I believe Cincinnati is deserving. I believe Group of 5 schools are deserving. But if the charge is to get the 4 best teams in the country, can anybody say that we believe right now Cincinnati 10 times out of 10 would be the odds-on favorite, and even 6 times out of 10 would be the odds-on favorite taking on Notre Dame on a neutral field? The answer to that is no. So,
you know what the amazing thing is we've gotten this far into it and we haven't talked about it. I think the thing as we talk to people, and we've got a bunch of great guests coming here, are going to be as mad about later on the show, is the Ohio State portion of this. Because if we look at the things that are very different in 2020 in all of this, the idea that Ohio State now sits at 3 as an undefeated conference champion, but we know playing a lesser amount of their season, and the amount of people that I want to see, or that I see right now, wanting to penalize Ohio State for the Big Ten Conference's sins, to me is very interesting. And I think a lot of the conference bad blood spills into these discussions in a way that, again, as a one-time conference person this year, go ACC, 2 teams in the playoff from the SEC. It's what a year for our conference, by the way.
We'll get into the ACC and the Big Ten, Ohio State. We got a lot of guests coming. But first, we got to get to our weekend review. Crunch Time Edition brought to you by Cheez-It. Let's take a look at some of the best from the weekend of action. And it starts with Ole Miss. Just bam! Get out of my way, Brad.
Oh.
I mean.
Oh, but is he okay?
He's not. He does not look like he is.
Oh, okay. All right. He's getting up now. He's good.
Well, you know.
Yeah. Listen. again, I will say it till I'm blue in the face. I got to do the guest refereeing one year at the South Carolina spring game, learning it. And the spatial awareness that you have to have out there in order to not get blown up in spots like this is wild. Like, I'm glad to see Buddy got up at the end of that, and it doesn't look like he took a head-to-head hit here at the very least. So
why didn't he move? He just like braced himself.
Well, when you don't know what to do, when you're not athletic, that's what you do. I mean, and I saw a highlight last night from our friend Kelsey Riggs was showing me from one of her first jobs where she just got smacked on the sideline, and she said she had a bruise on her butt for a month from where her phone was sitting. All right, next up, Northwestern with, just a dirty interception. And maybe my favorite part of this was Gus Johnson, who does great work calling these games, had a true me moment when his voice cracked as he said, "Oh my God," with the interception. But look at him go up for it, and he said, "Go gadget arm, I want that."
That's amazing.
Just to be clear, is he wearing the hooded sweatshirt underneath there?
Yeah, with no sleeves. I don't understand
Climbing
this.
my power rankings as the swaggiest thing a DB can do.
No!
I think the look is incredible. Christine, more fashion forward than Jason. What's your ruling?
I would say that's pretty fashion forward. Anything that's doing something that other people are not doing and you're killing it, 100%.
Oh, so my Christmas onesie with cats on it last week was fashion forward? You said anything.
What I said was it was a little bit too much.
You said anything.
We're doing the most.
And like you said that other people aren't doing. Everyone's got an aunt that's doing what you were doing.
Okay. You know what? I know your family, and all right, at the top of the list.
Oh my God.
This might just be the biggest crunch of 2020. Look at this. He's going the distance. He's going for speed, and then,
Oh no, this is the highlight from a different play on here.
Yeah.
This is Trey Sermon going crazy on this one. Y'all were looking for the John Mechie hit. But
I was looking for the hit. Yeah, we got the wrong one.
We can have a Trey Sermon moment here if we want. Because what in the hell did he do yesterday?
He was a psychopath.
He preached, Sermon.
Somebody said that already. Somebody said that on the broadcast yesterday.
Sanchez stole it yesterday.
Oh, it was
stole it.
Yeah.
Everyone's been waiting to get their Sermon on the blank jokes off this season.
He was a baller.
I mean, just in that game alone, Trey Sermon, who's Oklahoma transfer, for everyone that wasn't aware in that game with Ohio State right there, it was maddening in the beginning of that game watching Ryan Day in this offense. Every time they would break a big run, say, you know what? That worked too well. Let's go back to deep passes.
Let's pass it.
Until they finally realize, wait, we can just hand the ball off every time and we will win. And look at acquire currency, pass, go, collect $200.
I mean, that was the most Madden football game I've ever seen, where you got the one play that the guy can't stop, so you just keep running it over and over and over. By the end of that game, it was just like, hey, we all know what's coming. Let's just watch it happen.
Which is the darkest feeling in the world. Like, again, as we relive the Alabama 2012 title game with the Notre Dame 1-4 matchup in the BCS this year, that was the worst part, is seeing it just roll wave after wave like that. For Northwestern, that's been a very good team all year and that very much earned their spot in the Big Ten title game with the way they played, with a good defense. Just watching the other team, and running is just demoralizing. It's like a knife wound versus getting shot, like demoralizing how personal it is up front and all.
Well, and Northwestern, by the way, you mentioned it. Pat Fitzgerald had that team playing lights out this year. They were very good. They had a great defense going into it. They seemed to have a really good game plan. Game control being the metric that we've heard used about Cincinnati a few times. Well, the game control in this game wasn't great until late when Ohio State was able to pull away.
Also, in that one, worth, again, reiterating, Ohio State was down a lot of bodies in this game because of COVID restrictions, which, as Heather Dinich pointed out to us, that 21-day period return to play that the Big Ten started off this season with now knocked down to a 17-day period, which, how about that coincides with the January 1st date when they're going to be playing here. Like, I know we talked about the Big Ten fudging the rules when it came to getting in the title game. I'm fine with this one where they're looking at medicine. Now, CDC regulations have changed. There are a bunch of reasons that I hope are grounded in science in this, but it looks way too football-y to probably give them that credit.
Well, if anybody's going to give us straight talk about all of it, it's Paul Feinbaum. He joins us now. You can check him out, obviously, all over the SEC network. Paul, thank you so much for the time this morning. We appreciate you, my friend. So give me first and foremost, we were just talking about Ohio State. What's your reaction to Ohio State being 3 in the final college football playoff?
Well, I think Ohio State took advantage of the controversy and the media narrative between Notre Dame and A&M, and they just slipped right through. And I think they also slipped right through, Fitz, because we all know this committee did not want to see a third matchup between Notre Dame and Clemson. So they really lucked out. For all the controversy over whether they should or shouldn't be in, it really didn't look like it was very close. So they sneak in. They're in a good spot. I have no problem with it.
So, Paul, just to be clear, you had no problem with the fact that they played fewer games than a team like Texas A&M or anyone else, and them being involved in this conversation?
No, because that's what we get. I mean, this whole year is turned upside down, Mike, and I just think they played the schedule they were given. I mean, if it had been up to Ryan Day, they would have started playing on Labor Day weekend. I mean, they can't help it. They're in a dysfunctional league right now. That they can't seem to get anything right. And what I mean by that is what you just got through saying. For all the science and all the medical comments that we heard from the Big Ten commissioner and other people in that league on August 11th when they shut down, it seems like none of that matters anymore, does it? So I'm not going to fault Ryan Day and his football team. They went out, they played every game, they won every game, they won the conference championship game, and quite frankly, I don't have a problem with it at all.
Paul, I'm curious what you think about where the committee is putting Big 12 teams with 2 losses. Right now, Oklahoma obviously at number 6 with 2 losses. Iowa State had been in the top 10 in the last few weeks with 2 losses. How do you feel about how the committee is viewing the Big 12 conference?
Well, they're certainly giving it a lot of weight, which I'm not sure I would. But I never can quite understand when we get to this point. The differentiation. And, I'm with a lot of people on Cincinnati. I don't know what Cincinnati has done to the committee, why they continue to get disrespected every single time we get a ranking, but that just comes with the territory right now. I'm sure it didn't help this week, and I know this is not supposed to be part of it, but when Mike Oresco, the AAC commissioner, went out and unloaded on the CFP committee, essentially saying we would be better off going back to the BCS, that stung. I don't know if that was retribution or not, but I'm betting it had something to do with it.
Paul, obviously all eyes were focused on the 4 spot today, Notre Dame getting in over Texas A&M. How did you grade that one? Did you feel like the Aggies got shorted here at all?
I don't, and I know a lot of people would think, man, you work in the SEC country, you would be waving that flag. But Mike, I think if you're going to look at the resume, they did not have the resume. They may have looked like a better team yesterday, but how can you really tell? They were playing the University of Tennessee. That's a 3-7 team where nothing short of turmoil is currently permeating the air on Old Rocky Top. While Notre Dame, they got rolled. They looked terrible. I would have liked to have seen Notre Dame, put up a fight, but their quote-unquote resume is better. Now, I do think it's somewhat comical to listen to Gary Barta talk about maybe the difference of the year in college football was winning on a Friday afternoon at North Carolina. I'm not sitting here dismissing and disrespecting Mac Brown's program. They're good, but they also have a couple of losses, 1 or 2 that are one in particular against Florida State that's just unexplainable and inexplicable. So if that's going to be the difference maker, great. Now A&M was not given any favors by having the final game of the year in Knoxville. It would have been nice if the SEC had done what everybody else did and just make it up as they go along and maybe match them up against Georgia yesterday to give them a more quality win. But to the SEC's credit, they played the schedule that came out at the beginning of the season.
Paul, a bunch of us on radio over the last week have been saying that college football has a massive problem because it's so predictable who gets into the playoff. I've said it. But last night I went into the rankings and ratings and started looking at it. The TV numbers are great. It seems like the interest is big on the sport. Are we making much ado about nothing? Is there really a problem?
No, because Fitz, what are we supposed to do? Kick Alabama and Clemson to the curb? I mean, they're the best 2 teams in college football, and they have been since the inception of this process. Ohio State has been there pretty much every year. It's not like, because they played a 6-game schedule that they came out of nowhere. And Notre Dame has been there quite a few times. I understand the noise. I'm part of it. You guys are part of it. It's disseminated on our program every afternoon. It's more about the little guys than it is the big guys. And the only way to change it, and I heard it a minute ago, is to expand the playoff. But if you expand the playoff, we barely got 4 this year, okay? I wouldn't have been all that unhappy if the committee had come out today and said, you know what, we're taking another look at this thing, and sorry about the semifinals. We're just having Alabama and Clemson, because quite frankly, those are the two best teams in the country. We know that. But if you add a couple of more, then the conference champions all get in. Cincinnati gets in, and the hinterlands are happy. But I'm not sure that's really the best way.
Paul, who would your Final Four have been?
The same four that they were picked. I mean, I said a couple hours ago, this is what I think should happen. And I, as much as I would love to bash this committee, and listen, I don't like them any more than you guys do. I think they come off haughty and pretentious when the spokesperson comes out every week. They're not transparent. I want to know what happened in that committee. I want to know everybody's vote. They won't tell us that. But I find myself every year at about this time agreeing with them, and that makes me sick.
Paul, when you think about the top four, all right, we know who is in the top four. Obviously, somebody has to win this whole thing. Who are you taking winning it all?
Alabama. I've never wavered on that. I thought they were the best team in August, and Nick Saban has done perhaps his best coaching job, fighting through the same thing everyone else has done. But he just started earlier. When everybody was running home on March 12th, Nick Saban was at his office figuring out a way to beat everyone else this year. And right now he has done it, and I think he'll have done it completely in about 3 weeks.
Paul, you're the best, my friend. We appreciate your time, your insights. Have a great holiday. Hope you and yours are safe and well, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much. Enjoyed it.
I think what Paul just said there is a very reasonable take on all of this. Like, it is so easy to trash the entire process, but I'm not sure that the committee really got this wrong. Like I said earlier, I would have no problem if the committee put in Texas A&M at 4. I'd have no problem if the committee had put Cincinnati up, obviously, because I'm a fan of what they're trying to accomplish. But the way they got it, I mean, Christine, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't be sitting in the room saying, oh, my God, you guys all suck.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I think we're talking about possibly expanding or doing that kind of thing, because it kind of adds to the drama, but everything else is very predictable, right? Like, we know that these top 4 teams have been the top 4 since the very beginning, since we started doing college football rankings. But it's like, okay, how can we add a little bit more excitement in this? That's why I was like, oh, it'd be so much more exciting if A&M was in this, because at least we'd have something to get revved up about. But, like, it's very predictable. The college football season is very predictable. Going into every season is very predictable. You know who's going to be at the top. And so I feel like that just kind of adds a little bit more fun to it.
Yeah, I think people get frustrated by that. We see it happen in every level. When you've got sustained greatness, people only grow to hate the thing that is there often in front of them. And I heard Spencer Hall, who's on Thinking Out Loud with Richard Johnson and Alyssa Lang and everyone there, talking on ESPN Daily with Pablo Torre, like, there are very clear stratifications in college sports of excellence, but the way that we rank and do this is always very arbitrary, and it's frustrating, I'm sure, when you look out at all the other sports and see set ways of doing things, and then you look at college football and you see throw glitter against a wall full of glue and see what sticks. I did glitter for you.
I really appreciate that. By the way, speaking of things I appreciate, I've got cheese pizza Cheez-It today, which I didn't know they even made until
Dude, I have
today.
got a medley. I think there's ranch in here. Yeah. Christine, what are you rocking with right now?
Pizza Grooves with zesty ranch is straight fire. It's fire.
As if God didn't make ranch good enough, then you want to zest it.
Zest that thing.
Can we, and let's be real, this is Rankings Reaction presented by Cheez-It. These bowls are filled with Cheez-Its, and, Nicole does a great job every week coming in and making sure that we've got tons of Cheez-Its, tons of flavors. I feel bad every week because I eat almost all of them, which I've done the math on, means I'm eating like a box and a half of Cheez-Its during this 1-hour show every week. I'm not proud of it. Like, I know where the quarantine fluff is coming from right now.
I'm not proud at it, but I'm not mad at it either. Big up. We in the building.
Big up.
So you can see the rankings right there. Alabama at number 1, Clemson at number 2, Ohio State in at number 3, Notre Dame sitting at number 4, Texas A&M at 5, Oklahoma at 6. And the funny thing is, I just said I wouldn't have had a hard time between Notre Dame and Texas A&M, whichever one they chose to put in at 4 or 5. I am a little curious about Ohio State from the standpoint of this. Paul's absolutely right. Paul Feinbaum earlier. Like, they played all the games on their schedule. They did what they had to do. They fought the meat that was the meat of the work that had to be done. The thing is, every game is such a crapshoot to some level. And think about that for Florida. Like, how different is Florida's year because of one game that they should have annihilated LSU?
Yep.
And I'm not saying that Ohio State wouldn't have annihilated everybody on their schedule. I'm just saying that they have to take less chance. And at some point, if you're sitting at a roulette table with somebody and you're only spinning every once in a while, you have a much better chance of having some money left at the end of the night. So I think that's the toughest part of me for this committee. If I was on the committee, I don't know, as much as I believe that Ohio State is one of the 4 best teams in the country, I wouldn't have voted them in simply because they didn't have to leverage that. They didn't have to risk it, so they didn't put as much on the line.
I will devil's advocate this and say, in the interest of 2020 and things, Ohio State also didn't have a choice that their season was shut down for a while. While other people were practicing, Ohio State had to sit idle. They had to come back later than all this. Their preseason, which creatures of habit, like every athlete is, like every musician is, disrupted in such a way, and all of this turned into such a crapshoot that they got a later start. They were coming in cold to a race that other people had already started running and had to try and catch up. So there is part of me that applauds the fact that they were able to, because again, like Paul said, they didn't control that. They didn't control the start. We heard from Justin Fields, Ryan Day, and the people that had a chance to speak that we want to be playing in our conference, which again, if it made in the interest of health and safety, I cannot fault to an extreme for doing this, made a decision that was outside of their power.
But the big thing to counter that is what you said earlier. In 2020, everybody's been dealing without, whether it's without games or whether it's without substantial portions of your roster for games, which impacts your ability to win or to lose games. I mean, how much different would the season look if Trevor Lawrence hadn't missed that first game against Notre Dame? We don't know. But Clemson took an L in a game that mattered because of COVID-19. So just like at some point, just like Ohio State was impacted in a way they didn't get to play games, do we know that Oklahoma wasn't impacted by, like...
Oh, I mean, Cincinnati didn't get to, from the time the rankings came out until this last weekend, they did not get to play a game from November 21st until then. And that probably had as big an effect on the playoff scenario and everything we saw as anything, in a way that, again, because the group of 5 doesn't get the benefit of the doubt that the Power 5 does, makes it the thing people are upset about.
Well, and that's the hardest part of this entire equation, is that 2020 has, Christine, been 2020 for everybody. Like, the impact is very different for everybody, but it's very real for everybody. And that's why I think, to be fair to this committee, it's the toughest year this committee could have ever seen.
With the first rankings, we kind of wanted to see how the CFP committee was going to take that into consideration. Were they going to give more clout to a Cincinnati, a BYU, those kind of teams that weren't getting as much love in previous years because they're playing more games and they're playing really well? Or were they going to look at teams like Ohio State that aren't playing any games and still put them in the top of the rankings? You know what I'm saying? So I feel like it's just a little bit of how the committee views the year and looking at that and what that means moving forward.
And it's why, by the way, that keeping the formula, again, cloudy instead of structured, creates room for them. They could have done whatever they wanted.
Exactly.
They could have justified a team with a number of losses. They could have justified Cincinnati or BYU or Coastal and put them higher, because we don't know the exact formula, the exact way you put the ingredients together to make college football playoffs.
But that's been part of what's ticked me off over the last 2 weeks, is that I feel like what we've gotten is a committee that's using the eye test, and then they're picking and choosing which metrics support the eye test that they want to give us for each different team. Not even each different week. They're like, oh, we'll take a little bit of this for this team, but we like the game control for this team, and this team hasn't played. And like,
but what did you point out to us before the show, though? Because we did have a set recipe for a while for how we cooked this whole thing, and what did it give us?
That is true. We can now, thanks to the brilliant people at Stats and Info at ESPN, they've hooked me up with some knowledge on the BCS. And what I can tell you right now is we don't have a final, but they're 95% at this point. The BCS this year would have given us the same top 4 teams, which means every single year of the college football playoff, the BCS would have given us the same, not always in the same order, but they would have given us the same top 4 every single year. Computers, humans, all the same.
But the most interesting thing, didn't they say that Cincinnati would have been at number 6?
Yes.
That's the only difference.
So let's bring in, because I'm going to start with a pointed question. We're going to bring in our buddy, Coach Jim Mora Jr. joining us. Coach, thanks so much for the time. Let me be direct with this, because you are always a great voice for the Pac-12. If a Pac-12 team had the same exact resume as Ohio State this year, would they have gotten in?
No chance. Pac-12 doesn't get the respect that the Big Ten gets, and I think it's unfortunate. I think in the past maybe it's probably accurate to have it that way, but I think this year, had USC been able to beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game Friday night, that they'd have warranted consideration, in my opinion, but I don't think they'd have gotten consideration.
Coach, I'm curious, do you think, what can the Pac-12 do? What can Larry Scott, the Pac-12 commissioner, do? Is there anything they can take from this season that helps remedy that going forward or get them closer to this conversation?
Well, I think the decision to play the early games may help them. Initially, I didn't think it was a good idea because I thought it was unfair to the players to have to get up and try to be ready to play at 9 a.m. But when Arizona State played USC early in the game, they got some eyes, but they need to play well in big games in front of big audiences, and they have to schedule games against great teams. And there were some games scheduled this year early that were canceled that would have maybe helped them in the eyes of the nation in terms of regaining some of the respect the Pac-12 used to have. But the bottom line is this: is they haven't been able to muster enough wins, respect to get themselves in a position to even be considered the last few years.
Coach, when you look at the CFP and how it impacts the rest of the postseason, including bowl games, it's almost as if, especially this year, people don't really put as much weight on the bowl games as they do on the CFP. As a former coach, how do you get your players excited, especially guys that are looking to go to the NFL, about playing in bowl games that don't really have any championship implications?
Well, this year is entirely different. There used to be a reward factor to it. You got to go spend some time in a city that you weren't necessarily familiar with. You got to spend some time with your teammates out on the town. You locked into a game. You played on national television, usually against a good opponent. You got some really cool gifts. It was fun. But over the last few years, this game has taken on a little bit of a different identity. It's more of a business. If you're a big-time player that's a first-round draft pick and you're not playing in a game that's going to impact your team's rankings, then maybe you opt out and you start to prepare for the NFL. So it's just kind of a change in culture. I don't think it's ever going to go back, quite frankly. And, this year you're seeing teams opt out of bowls because of COVID stuff. Let's keep it in perspective. There's people dying out there, losing their jobs, losing their businesses, losing loved ones. But these college football players have been through a lot this year. They get up every morning, they get tested, they practice, but they don't ever get to really hang out with their buddies. They're in the locker room at different times. Their meetings are virtual. They don't have training table that's a grab-and-go system. They're playing in front of empty stadiums without their families there in many, many cases, and they don't want to go through that again. So they opt out of bowls, and I understand that. But it's just an entirely different year, and I think it's a different culture now going forward.
I'm going to ask for your perspective on something that, not just with this, but overall, as the Rose Bowl will not be played in California at this point. We know the semifinal game will be played instead in Arlington. As somebody that knows so much about not just the Pac-12, but the West Coast, what's it mean to not have that game in California?
Well, I think it's devastating, and I think it's a further knock on the Pac-12, and I think it's a knock on the West Coast's commitment to football, which I don't think is accurate because I think there is a commitment to football on the West Coast. But unfortunately, there's a governor in California that put some mandates in order that we're not able to get past, and I think it's unfortunate for the players. I think it's unfortunate for the stature of the Rose Bowl game. But you know what? If the Rose Bowl is not going to allow parents to come and watch their sons play in such an important football game, then it shouldn't be played there, and they should be penalized. But it's unfortunate. It goes back to, unfortunately, I think, a lot of politics.
Coach, getting to work with you every Friday on College Football Live has been one of the best things that's happened to me in this fall. I really appreciate your time, your friendship. Merry Christmas, my friend. Hope you have a great holiday.
All right, you too, pal. Take care.
So, I bring that up because for anyone that didn't see the report, Heather Dinich brought it up last night. She reported it last night. They are moving the Rose Bowl from California to Arlington, Texas. So they're doing that because restraints in California aren't allowing for anybody to be at a game. So families wouldn't be allowed to be there. Families can be there in Arlington. Now, it's just a title of a college football semifinal game. So for me, it's easy to look at it and be like, all right, who cares? They're just going to play the semifinal game somewhere. But Christine, at the same time, it is the Rose Bowl. So there won't be the Rose Bowl that we're so used to seeing. Like, there is impact to that.
I think it's tough because originally when I saw that, people were saying Brian Kelly said that he wasn't going to play in a CFP if he can't have families there. And originally I was like, this is ridiculous, right? It's 2020. People are having to figure out how to adjust in 2020. But it does also make sense if you can figure out a way to get families there to be able to do that. And so it's unfortunate that it's not going to be where it usually is in the Rose Bowl. But, if we have to move to Arlington, then that's what we have to do.
Yeah, I think it hurts, but it's not a penalty. I think that choice of words, and I'm not accusing Coach of doing that pointedly, but I think it's incorrect to say it's a penalty. that area is dealing with a lot when it comes to the virus right now. And Fitz, relative to Coach Kelly's comments, you and I texted a lot about this the other night when you were on the radio, is I never saw anything definitive in those comments from Brian Kelly that said this was about making California make an exception for us. That's what the committee that governs all this was waiting to see come from. But Brian Kelly's point was, if we can play this in a safer area where our families can come, like the other semifinal is going to enjoy, why are we being beholden, as he put it, to the ashes of tradition at a place like the Rose Bowl there? And so I think Brian Kelly and Dabo Swinney, I don't want to go as far to say that they're the reason this happened or that it influenced it. I think it was always going to be decided by what the waiver looked like here, but I think them bringing it up publicly certainly made it more of a focus.
And I think it's important to admit when I feel like I could have done something better. On College Football Live on Friday and on the radio Friday night, I was pretty hard on Coach Kelly because of the content, the quotes that I saw and the audio that I heard. When you look at the entirety of the context, you're right, Mike, that there's a lot more to it than just, I don't think that California should be changing any rules to work around college football. There are bigger issues for the state of California. That being said, if the issue is how do we get this somewhere that's a fairer place to play so families can be there, if that's something that those families are comfortable doing, and if that's something that this is a stadium that's comfortable hosting, that's up to all of them to decide. Just like it's up to California to make their regulations, it's up to Texas to do the same. And for Coach to want to be somewhere that gives a better opportunity for families to be there is something he can discuss with his players and families. So I want to be really clear about that. I certainly don't think California should be changing things for college football, but I think there was a lot more to this conversation.
No, and certainly I would say the other way you could spin this is, why would we be flying a bunch of players out into that area as it's progressively gotten worse from the beginning of the season till now?
So, sometimes I can just put my feet up and let the magic happen, and that's what's about to happen because I got two big boys that are about to go at it, at least in my mind. Mac Lain going to join us. And I think it was Mac Lain that said at one point, he said to us at one point, let's see what it looks like when the varsity plays. And we saw that last night. Emac, get it off your chest. Get after big boy. Let's go.
Hey, look, I tried to tell you guys that was what the plan was. That was what was going to happen. And, Mike, I'm sorry. It's unfortunate. And, my screen's glitching here. I don't know if I'm even coming through to you guys right now. I'm in Dirty Myrtle, calling the inaugural Myrtle Beach Bowl here in South Carolina. So I'm sorry if that just glitched out and y'all can't even see me. I'm dealing with some sketchy Wi-Fi right now.
By the way, I said 3 touchdowns. I'm joining him on this one. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Eric, we can hear you just fine in here. I am a man of my word, and so I will be wearing your Clemson jersey next week when it comes to the radio. We made that bet on Golic Jr. this past week. But I also want to congratulate him, first off, on being a part of the inaugural Myrtle Beach Bowl. And then secondly, on my fellow conference mate, 2 ACC teams in the college football playoff right now. This is a day of celebration. I don't know why you guys are trying to pit conference friends against each other.
Hey, I'm feeling it, man. I'm all about it. I'm excited that the committee, allowed that to happen. And I think they should. I think when you look at resume, I called Notre Dame the most complete team in the country many times this season. And I still think they're maybe number 2 behind Clemson when you look at who they are, what they have, a healthy Clemson, by the way. So I think that team their wins stack up. They have a win over the number 1 Clemson Tigers. They have a win over an amazing UNC team that has the best offense, most explosive offense in the country. So I think there's no doubt they deserve that 4th spot.
Emac, you talk about Notre Dame's resume and how you feel like it stacks up and they're right behind Clemson. When you think about Ohio State, we had a conversation about the fact that, they've only played 6 games. Who knows how it would have been if they played a complete season? How are you feeling about the fact that they're now at number 3?
I thought it was just inevitable. Now, whether I agree with it or not, that's a different story. I think the fact that a team can go out there and only have half the risk, play half the games, half the amount of chances to get this virus, get an injury, or anything of that nature that could suffer or hurt you down the line, is interesting that they can still reap the benefits of the full reward. So when you talk about that, it's interesting to see how the committee, ranked them, but they never wavered. The committee did not move Ohio State in any negative fashion at any point in this season. So I don't think anybody ever truly thought that they were not going to be in.
Eric, I got to ask you about the Heisman, but before I do that, I'm a little stuck on something. You're going to wear his jersey on Chiney and Golic Jr.?
Yeah, we made a jersey bet.
And he picked the purple one. He picked the purple one, too, so it'll be nice.
Ooh,
Are you sending him that jersey to wear, or did he buy that jersey?
Yeah, as long as he sends it back. I mean, I'll send it to him.
Wow.
Okay. I was just, if there was free merch going out, I was just trying to angle into some of it.
Unbelievable.
If there's anything I'm consistent on, it's I will root for any team if they send me free stuff.
That's
Come
right.
on. All right,
That's
so
right.
last night after the game, Dabo said quite clearly that it would be a disgrace if the Heisman never attaches their name to Trevor Lawrence. Interesting way to word it, but at the same point, that it's that reminder that Trevor doesn't have that. In your mind, is Trevor Lawrence, did he show us last night that he should be the Heisman winner?
You know, guys, I truly think he did. And this award has become such a stat-heavy thing. You know, there's voters out there that will literally, at the end of the season, look at who leads the country in touchdowns, look who leads the country in yards, and say, yep, that's the Heisman, and have no context. And surely, you know, those are great players, and you know, it's not necessarily wrong to choose those guys. But if there's a guy that matters more to his team, I just haven't seen him. I mean, Mike, you're talking about a 31-point swing from the first time Clemson played Notre Dame to the second time they played Notre Dame. And a big reason for that was Trevor Lawrence. And so I just don't know if there's a player in the country that's worth 31 points, but Trevor Lawrence surely is. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think the fact that the Heisman voting opened before the games were done, I think almost a week before the championship games were played, that might hurt him. But again, at the end of the day, the NFL guys, they're pretty good at evaluating talent. And I don't think anybody's questioning who's the number one overall pick.
Certainly not. As a Heisman voter, I can tell you it opened last weekend, but I can also tell you I still have not cast my vote waiting for this one.
I'm sure, that's awesome, dude. Like, I get, all BS aside, that's a cool honor to get to vote on the Heisman.
Still don't know how they made that mistake, but I'm not taking away my password, not yet. So it is going to be very compelling between what we saw from Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, and certainly Trevor Lawrence this weekend. But Heisman talk can wait for the rest of today. Theismann talk starts now while we've got our friend Eric Mac Lain here. Former Clemson offensive lineman, myself, former Notre Dame offensive lineman. Going to celebrate a man from Southern California. Look at Andrew Voorhees right here. The big fella catching it on the fly, and it doesn't count, but it matters. It matters to a lot of people. Emac, what do you think of the athleticism in the open field there?
Hey, you know what? Other than not having his knees up, I thought it was really good. Athletic play. You see the strides there, but I've got to get those knees up. Come on, 72. Get them up. Get them up.
Jason, Christine, obviously you guys are just enthralled by the athleticism and I think the awareness at the end of the play to pitch it and try and keep it alive there just shows he's also a team guy.
He's looking for the next big play. He's aware. He's shown that awareness off.
Why are you running? That's my question. Like, if you know the play's not going to count, why not? Why waste the steps?
You know why he's doing it? So he can be on this show right now. That's why he did it.
Because he knows the hashtag Thick6 means something. Because the Theismann means something. Wow. And because big people doing great things matters, Jason.
Oh my gosh.
I got nothing. Right. I don't even know how to get. I'm still shook by the entire thing. All right, Eric Mac Lain, we appreciate you hanging out with us. Before you go, though, if we're going to talk about great moments. They say we've got this.
Oh, my God.
Oh, no.
I mean, I don't know. We're just prepping it. They said that they had this and wanted to get Emac's thoughts on it since you guys.
Hey, look, Mike said, I can't wait to see all these highlights. I'm sorry it had to happen right here, buddy, but are you having nightmares right now? Are you excited about this opportunity? I mean, the line has already opened up, and it's close to the 20s, man. I mean, how are we feeling?
Listen, it is. I expected worse from that line based on sentiment. I mean, look what the SEC championship line was based on LSU beating that Florida team here. I will say there's a weird part of me, and I know I'm going to regret saying this out loud, that thinks it's somewhat of a better matchup style and scheme-wise for Notre Dame than a backfield that had, as Eric Mac Lain pointed out, the legs of Trevor Lawrence at its advantage, the way that Alabama doesn't have with Mac Jones. That is still a lot of speed to contend with, and the Irish are going to be understandably heavy underdogs.
So if there's an inkling of a chance that the Irish could beat Bama, Emac, you taking Clemson over Ohio State?
I'm taking Clemson for the rest of the thing. I can just tell y'all that a healthy Clemson team is one of the best, if not the best team in the country. So I can't wait to see it play out.
All right. I'm just trying to set you two up for the ultimate.
In case you couldn't see this, what I'm wearing right now.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that sweater.
Myrtle Beach's finest right there. Emac, have fun on that call with Marty and McGee as well. Going to be an absolute blast in Myrtle Beach.
They're the stars of the show. I just happen to be there, and I'm just throwing it down to them the entire game.
Emac, be safe, my friend. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank y'all. Always appreciate it.
I just wanted to make sure if there were free jerseys just going around. I
don't understand this because you just have no loyalty and therefore you're just down for whoever.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with a favorite college football team. I didn't grow up with a favorite college football player. I just love the sport. I just love the sport. So, you know what? I know how to celebrate. I know how to react every time I get something free.
Everybody likes to make fun of me because I have so many loyalties, but you have no loyalties, and nobody talks about that. So I feel like that's weird. All right, you want to rank some reactions?
Let's rank
some reactions.
Yes.
Speaking of loyalties, I freaking love Matt Campbell. Great guy. He had a little bit of a freak out yesterday. I was honestly shook by how mad this man was that Oklahoma didn't get the offsides call.
How is the ice cream machine not working again? I come here every week.
It's he was shaking.
The bottom of the bottom jaw going off to the side. That's when you know you're losing. That's what I look like when the Raiders play on Sundays usually. And when the jaw starts going to that angle, that's when things have gotten bad.
And the finger point with the wave. Yeah, he was mad. Buddy
got the shoulder massage from the backup quarterback there. That confused
I love that.
situation.
I love that. I saw a guy that one of his seniors, Jaquan Bailey. He's one of my favorite players on this team. He was trying to calm him down. It was great. It was a great moment.
The sassy little hands on the hips at the end of this number 2. Watch him put his mask up right here, and then he gets over here, and he's going to hit a little one-time with the sass.
Speaking of sass, let's talk about this ref the flag toss was so beautiful.
So there's a bar in Nashville where every Sunday night, Don't Cry For Me Argentina comes on, and everybody grabs napkins when it's not socially distanced. And at one particular spot, they throw the napkins in the air, and they all just come down and just cover the entire bar. It's very much like that. So I feel like he's been hanging out in Nashville.
Well, now you know next time how exactly you need to throw those napkins. They need to have all of this.
Yeah.
All of this. I don't know what that's even called.
It's a little flair for the dramatic.
Again. The attitude.
He's he's not even mad or disappointed. He's just you have been
here
caught.
You go. And finally, at number 1, Ole Miss pulled out the fire extinguisher. Is this even is that kosher? Are we allowed to do that?
I don't know, but now it makes me want to go take the fire extinguisher I have at home and absolutely let loose on somebody, Jason.
I mean, instead of making champagne blow up, why not do that? That's
Where
way
did
better.
they get that from? Who provided that?
Local hardware store? I mean,
they needed that in Atlanta because the SEC title game was essentially 2 people fighting with flamethrowers in the middle of the street. With those offenses, you could have used an extinguisher or two.
So wrong game then is what
this feels like a good idea. Mike, you should do that on New Year's Eve in the house. Just run around the house with the fire extinguisher and see what happens.
Speaking of something hot, look at this guy. This is Henry Cattleman. And,
more like Bicker.
He, in the rundown, it said he's stealing America's heart. I mean, he's doing something.
I think he is, and I'm as tough on kickers as anybody. But that kicker is tough.
I know he's not your normal. I mean, I don't like to put all kickers in a box, but he's not your regular run-of-the-mill kicker. That guy's something else.
And the stash to go along with it, Jason.
Well, no, it's not even just that. It's the look on his face. The look of I got this. That's the thing. That level of confidence.
I earned this.
Earn, not given. Exactly. This trophy, my body.
I mean, all right. The championship is January 11th in Miami, and if you can't make it there, join us virtually. It's the College Football Playoff All Access Experience, featuring exclusive content and the chance to win prizes. Register today at collegefootballplayoff.com/all access. It's a great way to hang out with it. And fear not, while this is the last of our rankings reaction shows for this season, we will be back for some college football semifinal action happening on the 1st at 4 o'clock Eastern. So you can check that out here. In the meantime, it's taken a bunch of people that don't get the opportunity to be in front of the camera to make the show happen. We thank them. We thank you for hanging out with us every single week to react to it. Christine Williamson, Mike Golic Jr., I'm Jason Fitz. Have an incredible and safe holiday, and thank you so much for giving us your time every single week. This has been Rankings Reaction, presented by Cheez-It.
Love you guys.
The dab.